morning to all who have joined us for Kinaway's first of 4 presentations held over the duration of Indigenous Business Month. Before we kick things off this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the Bundjalung people as the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you all from. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which each and every one of us are tuning in from, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also extend that respect to other Indigenous peoples who are present this morning. Throughout the month, we'll be presenting on topics aligning with this year's Indigenous Business Month, with webinars revolving around the Invigorate, Build and Maintain themes. The first panel discussion, which aligns with the Invigorate theme, will be held on Wednesday, 7th of October at 11 a.m. as we host Kinaway members from various industries as they discuss how they and their business have displayed incredible resilience in finding new ways to create value and effectively navigate through this period of economic uncertainty. The following Wednesday, 14th, same time at 11 a.m, Kinaway will be hosting our next webinar aligning with the Build theme as participating businesses share how they have been able to increase their market share, seize opportunities and build on their business's strategy. And finally, the Wednesday following, the 21st at 11 a.m, we will deliver our 4th and final webinar in conjunction with Indigenous Business Month. Again, aligning with the Maintain theme, which will focus on investing in your business, whether it be being clear on your values and objectives, finding mentors, or how to best serve your community while building your business. For this morning's presentation, we have a special and additional webinar as we invite corporate buyers, corporate partners, Kinaway members and Indigenous businesses to be a part of this workshop as we discuss how corporates can impactfully engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. My name is James Brown. I'm an economic broker with Kinaway and I'll be facilitating this morning's discussion. Joining myself, we have Kinaway's very own CEO, Scott McCartney. We also have Steph Craze from Western Program Alliance, Alan Murray, Director of Cable Containment Services, and Tim McCartney, Economic Development Manager at Barrenjoey Gadgin Land Council Aboriginal Corporation. A bit of housekeeping before we get things underway. We'll begin things off with Scott giving a presentation before we jump in and discuss some key items with our panel members. At the end of the discussion, we will have the opportunity to take any questions from the audience, so please feel free to post these questions on either the Kinaway Facebook or YouTube channels, comment section, as we will be discussing them a little later on. We're pleased to be hosting today's panel discussion with our participants and are pleased to have you all joining us this morning. Without taking up too much more time, Scott, I'll hand over to you to get things underway.
Thanks, James, and welcome everybody in what's a really exciting month for Indigenous businesses and obviously an opportunity for us to put the spotlight on some Indigenous businesses out there. And today's webinar and what I'm going to talk about today is just about changing that approach with Indigenous businesses. But before I get to that, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that I'm working on today and live on, so the Boonwurrung people's land. So, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. So and they allow me to live here and keep me culturally safe whilst I'm living on this land. Now, I guess one of the first things I talk to corporates about when they say they want to engage Indigenous business in their supply chain, I guess it's about the authenticity about that as well. And I always ask a really easy question, but at the same time quite difficult. What is an Indigenous business? And you'll be surprised in some of the answers I do get, and it's not in a disrespectful manner, but I don't think that many people out there understand that Indigenous business can be any Aboriginal person in business. Not just the catering, not just artwork and consulting. We have at Kinaway in particular, we have over 240 members, and we've got accountants, lawyers, restaurants, cafes, bars. We've even got a brewery. It's quite diverse. So basically, we felt I was to go through our membership database, I could live by just using our members, which is fantastic. And that's the one thing I talk to our members about as well, is about creating this ecosystem, this Aboriginal business ecosystem. But that's quite challenging. And when I look at the status of Indigenous businesses here in Victoria at the moment, probably not the size or the capacity to do what we all would like to be able to do. So do those bigger contracts. And And I think when you look at the the IPP that the Commonwealth government first launched, and having those really reach targets, up to 3%. Look, there's some massive opportunities therefore, but how we get there? How do we get to that target? It's not about just ticking a box. It's about how do we grow businesses to be able to have the capability and the capacity to do the contracts that all you people in this room would love them to do. And there's a big issue there. There's a big issue that I think the IPP itself was a great idea, but at the same time, I think it's fundamentally flawed to to actually help smaller businesses grow. And I think if you look at the Indigenous businesses in particular, to scale your business is quite challenging. And you look at our mob in particular. This is the first time most of our people have been in businesses in the Western world. Whilst we've been doing it for 50 to 60,000 years beforehand in trades with different mobs, it's probably a first time we've actually been into this Westernized version of business. And also when I look at the type of businesses we've got and how they're evolving, it's not generally because they've been in the industry for a long time, or they've actually put a lot of planning into it. It's always been about an opportunity that's arisen. And some of you people have probably heard me speak previously that the strategy that most businesses take when they get into business for the first time is, I call it the Bunnings sausage sizzle strategy, where they've bought a barbecue, bought some sausages, and we've got a business. Now, what happens then is we get very, very narrow-minded about what we do in that business. So, in terms of diversifying and so forth, it's not really an option because we're working so hard on the business we've actually got at the moment. But the big issue there is access to capital. Whether it's financial capital or even intellectual capital, having that support mechanisms around ourselves and our businesses that's actually going to allow us to grow. So we've got to change things. We've got to change this approach of, because I think we're all heard the term black-cladded. I think, there's a lot of black-cladded businesses, I believe, in this space. And not because they went into the business or into the industry with the wrong intention. I think by getting caught up in the contracts available, that we're maybe not developing our businesses the way we could be, which is around capacity and capability. So some of the examples of the black-cladded businesses are that you have an opportunity where you've got a big contract that you can actually bid for, but you don't have the capacity to actually even do that work because maybe just a sole trader or a mum and dad business, as I call them. So then being able to scale up is quite difficult. So what happens then is you're so busy working in your business, you don't have that opportunity to work on your business. And with the joint ventures that have happened around the country, the intention of a joint venture should be really about creating that experience, that lived experience of owning a business and scaling up. And then again, with the lack of access to capital, that makes that quite difficult. So a lot of the work gets subcontracted out. Now, I think what's happened in the meantime then, while that's going on, is we've all got pretty excited about being given these big contracts to Aboriginal businesses and meeting these targets. And with getting caught up in the joint venture situation and joining up with some bigger corporations to help your capacity, we've actually really forgot what the Indigenous procurement policies were actually for. Indigenous procurement policy was identified not just to create Aboriginal businesses and have these great business and wealth, to say that they're growing their wealth and creating wealth for the next generation. It's not about that at all. It's actually about creating jobs. And I think that's one thing everybody has is forgotten about, is the ability to, the studies that have been done at a Commonwealth level is that an Aboriginal business is 100 times more likely to employ Aboriginal people. And that's not happening. That's not happening at all. It's and that's because lack of capital, being able to borrow that money because we've got these contracts, guaranteed contracts to grow the business. And that's quite challenging for our members, is that how do they get there? We did a survey of all our members in, I think it was March, April, around COVID, and looking at the status of our businesses and Kinaway businesses and how the COVID was affecting them. We also got a bit of a snapshot of how many employees they had. And it was quite surprising that, I think the figure was around about 65%, 60 to 70%, actually were sole traders and didn't employ anybody directly. Now, that was a bit of a shock to me because that's really in line with the marketplace in terms of the wider community and the amount of sole traders and out there in the marketplace. So when I was thinking of why we put this Indigenous procurement policy together, that actually I would have expected there would have been more Indigenous people employed by the Indigenous businesses. And talking to some of our businesses that do employ Indigenous people, they find it quite hard to find the right people to take on roles in their businesses, and especially around labour hire is a really tough one where, you know, we'd love to have a labour hire that is 100% Aboriginal employees, but it makes that really complicated and hard because some of the skill sets just don't seem to be there at the moment. So what can we do? What can we do? And I've been looking at a couple of different models, how to approach this and how to build the capability first and then the capacity later on of Indigenous businesses. Now, the model that I've been looking at is how do we get that lived experience for someone who wants to get into business? How do we encourage that entrepreneurial thought about, you know, taking a risk to actually get yourself into business and grow that business over time? And, you know, I know as an Aboriginal person myself, and, you know, I was never even thought of going into business when I was a kid. And I think you'll find that for a lot of Aboriginal people around, that was never a consideration. Even though we'd done it for 50 to 60,000 years previously, it just, in the westernised world, it wasn't an option. You grow up and you were going to work for the co-op, you were going to work for local government, council, Commonwealth government. That was really the only options you ever thought about as a kid. And I remember looking at success as a kid, and I'd see my uncles and aunties and, you know, driving big flash cars because they were working for the government. I thought that was success. I didn't realise that I could actually go and create a business. So how do we change that? How do we change that thinking? How do we get people starting to think about they can do anything, which means including you know, going into business? And it means that we need to approach things differently as a community, as Aboriginal people. We need to approach things and encourage younger people to get into business, and that's going to come through, you know, cultural and society changes as well. But anybody can do anything. So it's getting younger kids into trades that one day will be contractors, that one day will be construction business owners. But that's easier said than done. So one of the things of the models I'm working on at the moment is mentoring a group of Aboriginal people that are interested in getting into a business, and mentoring them with partnering them up with a larger organisation. And we've got a model that's working quite well with Melbourne Water, where we've actually got 4 guys actually working with one of the contractors from Melbourne Water to give them that capability to learn the business in civil construction. And then after a period of time, and it's around about 15 months, they will then go out on their own. But they'll be employed in the meantime by the mainstream organisation, and that's to build their capability in the area. Now, the model seems to be working because the capabilities of these guys is increased substantially to the fact that now they're a real specialist in their field. And now they're looking at securing their own contract, a $2 million contract in civil construction. And that was because Melbourne Water, AMS, Solutions, that's the other company that mentored them, actually changed their approach. It wasn't about, you know, just ticking a box and I want to get this big $1 million contract to an Indigenous business, because there's nothing we can do right here today that's actually going to fix that problem. It's something that we have to do over a period of time. And that means take these approaches where we mentor the people that want to get into business, give them those capabilities of the industry, how to manage a business, and then slowly increase their capacity instead of thinking about we just need to tick that box to get that, you know, 1 to 3% target, which is achievable. But maybe not today for some of these, you know, industries where we need to find some growth for Indigenous businesses. So I think it's a really exciting time to start thinking differently. I think, you know, the fact with this webinar today that we sold out of tickets for this webinar today. So it's great to see that so many people are interested in how they can change Indigenous businesses and change the approach, in engaging Indigenous businesses. So that's the first step. So being here today is the first step of that. The second step now is understanding the why. Why would you want to engage in Indigenous business? And I think, you know, I talked to it before around about opportunities. It's about creating these employment opportunities and the effect that can have on Indigenous persons for their confidence. And, you know, seeing mum and dad in business is going to change a whole generation of children. And we talk about funding from government to fix their health needs, employment needs, those types of things. They're just band-aids. So we need to start thinking a little bit differently how we do this. And like I said before, for everybody here today, that is definitely the first step. I guess through the IPP and we've forgotten, I think, what it was really there for. So I'm looking forward to Indigenous Business Month in particular. Looking forward to the discussions we're going to have here today. I think we'll hopefully get some really great questions from the audience, and we can have a really sort of transparent, open conversation about what you can do differently, because this is a safe space for everybody. I think we're all here to learn, and that's one thing that we all need to understand. It is a safe place for us all to talk and work in. So thank you very much. Again, thanks for coming along, and let's feel free to reach out to me. Look, I've got some really good opportunities that I'd love to talk to you guys here about. So some business ideas, ways that you guys can engage Indigenous businesses in your supply chains. So let's just open up and have that conversation. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks, Scott. I know you raised some very valid points, which I'm sure some of these will be discussed throughout today's webinar. We did get one quick question that came through while you're presenting, and I might just run it by you briefly as well. It's from Regeneration Projects. I asked, hi, Scott, Matt here. Great conversation. What do you see as some of the unique characteristics of Victoria's Aboriginal business community compared with others across Australia or internationally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Matt. Look, I think it comes down to values. The values, and I can talk from my own experience and the businesses that I've spoken to, and obviously being an Aboriginal man, one thing that I've got a big purpose for is actually providing opportunities for my mob and my community, my family. And what you'll find, and then some of these studies have shown with Indigenous businesses, it's not about creating wealth. It's not about buying the big flash house and the big flash house. It's about what they can do to actually create some jobs for family, mob, and opportunities. So we don't go out there big noting ourselves and like I said, get all these big flash assets. It's more about the values, why they're doing it, and the impact, the social impact that's happening on families.
Wonderful. Once again, thanks, Scott. I am conscious of time, so yeah, I think we might have to move on and move to the panel discussion. So again, thanks for joining us this morning. Some great presentation. I'm sure some points which will be discussed as well throughout this morning's panel discussion. So I'd like to welcome Steph, Tim, and Alan to this morning's panel discussion. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're really excited to have you all, and yeah, we're excited to have a bit of a yarn as well.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, thanks, James.
You're welcome. No worries. Okay, so we'll get things underway. Steph, I'll kick things off with you. Can you tell us just a little bit about the Western Program Alliance and how you find and connect with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses?
Yeah, for sure. Firstly, just want to say thanks for inviting me to speak today. I've been a really proactive supporter of Kinaway for many, many years. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that I'm on today, that I was born on, I currently live on, and I've lived on for most of my life, the Bunurong and the Boonwurrung people. So, and acknowledge all the traditional owners across Australia and all my Aboriginal colleagues and friends present today, and Torres Strait Islanders too. Okay, so Western Program Alliance is made up of McConnell Dowell, Arup, and Mott McDonald. Plus, we work with our project partners, Metro and the Level Crossing Removal Project. So we've been given a fair chunk of work in the Level Crossing Removal program of work, and we've currently got Old Road, Werribee Street, and Cherry Street in Werribee, and we're also doing a significant portion of the Cranbourne line upgrade, which is a really big level crossing removal, as it's also rail duplication, train station rebuilds and things like that. So in terms of how I find and connect with Aboriginal businesses, I'm really fortunate in that I have over the years I've formed some really good relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business owners. So I'll tend to tap into that network first. So, where I'm familiar with the capability of those businesses, or I know I can pick up the phone and say, hey, do you know anyone that can do this? And then my next port of call I'll usually go to the Kinaway directory, because I have a preference, but also our business has a preference for engaging with Victorian-based Aboriginal businesses as a preference, because we're working on Victorian state government funded projects, so it's really important that we create opportunities for local businesses to have first shot at those packages. That also helps me to become sort of, keep tapping into the directory, because I'm finding that there's more and more businesses coming on board, almost on a daily basis. And then I stay in regular contact with Scott. I think he's probably gotten used to me calling him or emailing him at least on a daily basis. So I'll hassle him and say, we've got this coming up, anyone that can do it? I've got an idea, can I run it past you? So it's really about utilising the current networks and contacts, but also utilising that really valuable resource in the Kinaway directory.
Sure, wonderful, Steph. And Alan, from your perspective, as an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander business, how do you connect with corporate buyers? Is it through the means such as the Kinaway directory, or is it through your own sort of personal networks?
Yeah, well, Majika, everyone, and thanks for the invite. It's great to be on board and having a healthy discussion today around Aboriginal businesses and how we get more involved in the opportunities as well. And apologies, for some reason my camera isn't working, so I want to apologise. But I'm also currently up on Durabara country, so currently working up on traditional land, which is great. But in terms of connecting with corporates and businesses and the like, I guess it's a bit of both, and utilising Kinaway's directory, and then I think leaning on a few of the relationships that I've built over time as well. I was down in Melbourne on Bunurong and Wurundjeri country for nearly 20 years, and which has been a fantastic opportunity, and working down there and connecting with a lot of people, and then also the role that Kinaway play in assisting Aboriginal businesses to, I guess, elevate their status in the industry. So it's leaning on both of those opportunities and connecting with the Kinaway directory and corporates and industry directly as well.
Absolutely. And Tim, is it a similar sort of process for you?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, James. And just before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands I'm on today, which are my traditional lands, the Wotjobaluk, Jadwa, Jali, Wagai, and the Jabbercolt people of the Wotjobaluk Nations. It's a real honour to be a part of this conversation during an important month like Indigenous Business Month. But like Steph and Alan said, the best thing for us and how we engage with corporates at the moment is by doing events like this, attending sessions like this, finding out, but certainly, the importance of being registered with an industry, a chamber of commerce like Kinaway, to give corporate buyers a real asset that they know, but also to, the Marine 50 program has been quite good for us in connecting with buyers as well and working that out. But it's around the relationships, which has been the best thing. I suppose I wouldn't probably add too much more than what Steph and Alan have said around that. It's relationships are the key, and I think that's the key to any buyer, relationship going forward.
Absolutely, and just on the importance of that certification with Kinaway, the Chamber of Commerce here in Victoria, Alan, does that have a similar sort of importance for you as well, and in your industry?
Yeah, it certainly is. I guess to have that stamp of approval as we move in through and try and, or as we tender for projects as well, to have that, I guess, the tick of approval and the status to say that it is supported by Kinaway as an Aboriginal business to go out to industry, to have that backing as well. So yeah, it certainly, I guess, gives us a bit of credibility and I guess the spine as well as we go in and go for those projects as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. And Steph, to you. So, just as a corporate partner, how important is it for these Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses to be certified with Kinaway?
I think it's really important. Our client is the Victorian State Government, and obviously they're key sponsors of Kinaway, and they mandate us to spend a percentage of our project costs with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. So again, in terms of governance and an auditable process, we won't include any spend with Indigenous businesses that aren't certified by Kinaway or Supply Nation. It's about maintaining quality systems, but also it's about ensuring that, as Alan said, we're connecting with and supporting authentic, genuine Indigenous businesses. When I worked at Supply Nation, I can't tell you how many times I had calls, just random calls, people ringing up and saying, I run my own business. How do I become an Indigenous business? And I was like, well, are you Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? Do you identify with the community? And they'd say no. I'd say, well, you can't. So unfortunately, there are people out there who sort of try and take advantage of the system. So this information really gives us, confidence that the business is a legitimate business that identifies with and supports their community. And also, again, as I mentioned before, Kinaway certification. I go to Kinaway first because our preference is to work with Victorian-based businesses. So
wonderful. And just still with you, Steph. So as Scott alluded to earlier with his presentation, in terms of Indigenous businesses can sometimes find it quite challenging to scale in terms of financial capital and things like that. How are you kind of meaningfully engaging with these Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses, and are you doing it differently now than what has been done previously? And if so, can you tell us a little bit more as to how?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think across the whole construction industry, the behaviours around engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses is changing. Excuse me. As the sector's maturing, I think so are the buyers. When I started working in this space about 10 years ago, there were really only a handful of certified Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. And it was really all about cultural awareness training and RAP consulting, as Scott alluded to. But today we're really seeing, major contracts being awarded, right across, the sector, from Indigenous civil contractors, security, traffic management, labour hire, IT, office supplies, training. It's the whole gamut. And we're finding that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses are really getting repeat business, and the relationships are becoming stronger. So not just with diversity people like me, or inclusion people like me, but with the buyers in the business. So the construction managers, the plant managers, procurement managers, site administrators, they're reaching out to Indigenous businesses directly and starting to build those relationships and buying from them. Certainly in my experience, where I am now with McConnell Dowell and WPA, we're embedding Indigenous business procurement right at the start of our projects. So when we get our procurement schedules, we're going through all the packages, looking for opportunities to specifically target suitable businesses for those packages, trying to provide as much lead time as possible. We also built targets into our contracts with our non-Indigenous contractors. So I won't sign off on a contract unless I'm happy with the commitments that are being made. And that's not just around engaging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. It's also about the number of Aboriginal people they're committing to employ. So we've really got to get the subbies to do their bit as well. So, we're expanding at that next layer out. So I think at the 10 years ago, it was kind of a nice to have, but certainly for where I work, it's become a really fundamental part of our procurement strategy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steph. And Alan, how are you seeing corporate buyers meaningfully engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses, now when compared to the past?
Yes, and no doubt what Steph was saying in terms of the industry maturing as well. And I think they're starting to have a little bit more faith and confidence in Aboriginal businesses to go out and supply particular materials, or go out and to do the body of work that they need to do. And I think when it comes to the decision-making process, the confidence is starting to build, from the tier ones and the tier twos, and those guys, the site managers and the construction managers and the foremen and the like, they're having great connections now, I think, with Aboriginal businesses, and they're creating the relationship as well. And then on the back of that, the opportunities do get greater and greater. So when a package of works comes out, it might start off, reasonably small, but it's one of those self-performing opportunities as well. It's once you deliver on a particular package, when you tender for the next one, the package might be a little bit larger, so then you can grow your business as well. So, and having the roles that Steph plays within McConnell Dowell and Western Program Alliance, and there's a few other people in similar roles across other alliances and across the industry as well. It's great to have those people to consistently tap the decision makers on the shoulder and let them know that there are credible Aboriginal businesses out there who can deliver on the job. And that's a critical role that Steph and the others play in these companies as well. So, because we could tender for work week on week, but not deliver on a job or get the opportunity. But the role that Steph and the others play within these organisations and companies, they are vital to open the door a little bit more as well to meet the requirements that government have put out with the procurement targets and participation targets as well. So it's sort of it's a great teamwork opportunity that's out there.
Absolutely. And Tim, for you, are you seeing the similar forms of meaningful engagement from those corporates? And also, what can we do as a collective to really up the ante in terms of genuine and impactful engagement?
Yeah, I suppose, it's turning into, where it should be going, I suppose, from our business and being a native nursery and focusing on that part of it. It's, I suppose, for us, the challenging part is around the lead time in that and having those meaningful conversations to be able to get to it. So, for certain requirements and having the time to build those relationships and get those engagements in, one organisation we're dealing with, we're talking about a project in 5 years' time that we've, and growing that. And so that's a large investment that you need to have in your business now to, for 4 to 5 years for when you actually get that. And those are some of the challenges, like Scott was talking about, around how do you maintain your cash flow with that, but have those meaningful engagements to do that. I suppose the opportunity, like what I've seen, the big difference is that the corporate buyers are now open to having those honest conversations now. So, probably a couple of years ago, the honest conversation, they would clam up and, really defensive, thinking, that what they were doing was right. Now they're starting to understand, after a few years of this policy in place, going, hang on, we actually do need to change the way we look at it. We do need to start looking at just, it's okay to sign up to the procurement policy, but like Steph was saying, it really does come down to those subcontractors to be able to build the relationships with Aboriginal businesses as well, not just from tendering in as well. So those are the opportunities when we look at the demographic of where our businesses sit. The ability to be able to have relationships with subcontractors on some of these projects is really important. To up the ante, I think that we've really got to start to drive, and I think it's happening now. As Aboriginal businesses, culturally, what we used to do is we would band together for trade, and we really do need to start supporting each other and other members and forming those similar, like a little alliances, to be able to go to the corporates with more buying power with them. So so for instance, if there's an Aboriginal civil construction company out there, have a conversation with us as a native nursery, and they then are putting up a complete package to the tier 1, tier 2, that we can deliver all this as a suite of products, making their job a bit easier. But we need to start doing that and supporting each other and building our Aboriginal economic ecosystem to ensure that we can provide more. And I think that what we'll find over that period, if we start doing that we should be able to really smash this 3% target that's on the major projects, really start to, and that's when you're going to see the greatest ability to build capacity, because everyone talks about capacity building and think it's a really simple, A plus B equals C. Capacity building takes time and time and effort and money. And the best way to do that is we buy them together to be able to provide a one-stop shop. So yeah, that would be what I would say.
Cool. And Steph, do you think is there anything that you think we should do as a collective to really up the ante in terms of this engagement? From your perspective.
Absolutely. This is an area that I'm really, really passionate about, because I think it's time for a step change in the industry, particularly in construction, where there are so many opportunities. So the main thing is, as we sort of touched on earlier, around cash flow and contracts. So we've got to continue to provide access to business opportunities on our project, but do provide those longer lead times. So have those conversations, and those conversations, opportunities sort of present themselves organically as you develop and build those relationships and have regular communication. Again, along the same lines, being open and honest in our relationships, where Indigenous business owners are telling us what they need, and likewise, we're really transparent about what we need as the buyers, so that we can be flexible in trying to remove some of the barriers to engagement. I feel that flexibility has to be sort of embedded. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And to be able to sort of have faith in those relationships, that we can provide honest feedback, and constructive feedback, to ensure that, when we talk about meaningful engagement, it's about how does every interaction count? And even if there isn't a package that's awarded, what can come out of that interaction that might be positive or constructive for that business owner. I think that it's time for a lot of organisations to start thinking about how we can purposefully build and proactively scale Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses by helping to grow capacity and service offerings. So, for example, we might identify a procurement opportunity that currently can't be serviced in the sector. So, we could look at supporting an existing business to diversify service offerings or products, or, even consider supporting the creation of a new business or a JV or a partnership, supporting consortiums of Indigenous businesses to deliver on bigger packages. Tim expanded on that, so I won't go into any more detail, but that's it sounds like a simple answer, but it's still not something that's being, supported and introduced well into the buyer market. And the other thing is a supplier development program, I think, that's really well thought through, based on business need, Indigenous business needs, where we can work really closely with businesses that genuinely want to grow their business, because not everybody does. We talk about scaling and building Indigenous businesses, but not everybody wants that. So, it's horses for courses. So let's identify the businesses that really do want to grow, and leverage our technical skills and expertise, whether it be in construction or whether it be in just running a business, or legal or financial matters. And probably just finally, really building on the social procurement capability in our suppliers. We subcontract such huge components of our projects, that, we need to provide training opportunities for them, working events, and monitoring the contractual terms that we put in, that govern what we expect from them in terms of their ICI, industry capability and inclusion targets. And I think that we can really facilitate the relationships, resources like myself, we can facilitate the relationships between businesses and the suppliers. And as Alan said, one of the other things that we're doing, I think, which is probably quite unique to LXRP, is that the ICI leads from all of the alliances, we get together on a fortnightly basis and we share what we're doing. We talk about what businesses we're engaging with, what's working well. Can you recommend someone? Or, look, we had a great experience with this business, you should give them a go. So we're being a lot more collaborative, sort of across company lines, which is not generally something you'll see in most industries. So, I think we're starting to do things a little bit differently, and the intent is definitely there, but it is time for a step change.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steph. I am conscious of time, so we'll just have one more question just to cover off in our panel discussion, then we'll take it over to question time. And this is for you again, Steph. As corporates need to do their due diligence, and from experience, are there any sort of key points Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses need to consider when being engaged with corporates?
I guess it's really understand, like in any interaction, you've got to understand, what the needs of the business are. There are problems that need to be solved, in terms of sourcing services or products. And if you can really spend the time up front understanding, who your buyers are, what their business does, what they need, then you're already on the front foot. The worst thing you can do, I guess, from a reputational perspective is not really understand what it is that you might be bidding for, and then not be able to live up to the expectations or not be able to deliver, and then that will damage the future opportunities, because the construction industry can be pretty brutal in that, if you don't get it right on one occasion, you might not get another chance. And despite how much advocacy work people like myself or the other alliance leads might be able to sort of do, at the end of the day, it's the construction managers and the procurement managers and the those guys that are making the decisions. So be really selective about what you do bid for. Be realistic about what you can deliver on. And as we were saying before, just have open and honest conversations. Utilise the contacts that you've got, but don't. It's that old rule, right? Undersell and over deliver, and that applies, for any business. But that would be the main thing. Unfortunately, buyers will often, have much more of a laser focus on the outputs of an Aboriginal owned business, just because it's something that they think might be different, or they might be unsure about the ability to deliver. So it's even more important just to make sure that you target exactly what it is that you can and want to do, and then build on that reputation. Because again, in construction, one of the barriers that we face to bringing new businesses into the supply chain is that they rely very heavily on traditional relationships. So in order to break those relationships that they've had for 10, 15, 20 years, we need to bring in businesses that can actually deliver, to the same degree of quality and time and cost. So
wonderful. And Alan, is there any sort of key criteria that you apply, being an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business, when working with corporates or looking to work with a corporate?
Not specifically, but as Steph was saying, when it comes to getting involved in sort of these big projects as well, it sort of falls on the procurement managers and the decision makers within where the packages land, because there's been a couple of cases where, as an Aboriginal business, your prices are always going to be that little bit higher, because you haven't got the cash flow, you haven't got the resources and the like. So your prices are that little bit higher compared to your competitors who have been in the industry for a few years and have got good prices from here and there. But it's working with Steph and procurement managers as well, and the commercial team to be open and honest with them with your pricing, and let them know that if your pricing is a little bit higher than what they're expecting, hopefully they can be open and honest with you in return and come back to you after you send your submission through, to let you know that your prices are a little bit higher, and to give you the feedback. Is there an opportunity for you as a supplier to work your prices? So I think if that relationship can establish, I think there'll be more opportunities that can be created simply by going back and revising prices, and but not essentially squeezing yourself out of the job at the same time, but making sure that these projects can create those opportunities by having a second conversation.
Thanks, Alan. I am conscious of time, and I understand we do have a few questions that have come through throughout today's panel discussion. So I'd just like to thank you three for the panel discussion. We'll open it up for any questions that might have come through, and we'll take it from there. The first one is from Nagaja Orange, and they ask, for the product part of our business, we always find a challenge in dealing with corporates at a top tier level. Too many times we've been contacted by other non-Aboriginal businesses to procure from us than to sell onto the corporate entity, banks especially. We have developed a BCS that can help to show we can deliver. Question, how else can we develop relationships to be able directly deliver products? It's almost like having to make an institutional change in their thinking to... Tim, I'll send that one over to you.
Yeah. So how do you change that? Sometimes it's, it's understanding that some of these buyers have larger contracts that, an organisation might be delivering on 4 or 5 different services for that one business. So what you're really targeting is trying to build the relationship with, so if it's that, corporate client, build the relationship to try and understand where the opportunity is, where they might be who's their supplier, and how you might get in that supply chain there. It's one of the hardest things of it is sometimes it is a big thing and it needs to be broken into smaller pieces. But I think that was probably one of the greatest challenges with the IPP originally with construction, was getting packages broken down into smaller bundles as well. So I'm sorry. It's a hard one. I understand what they're saying. But, I think it's, like we were saying before, around the ability to band together and come with Aboriginal business alliances that can compete with those companies that do those one size fits all facility managements and that sort of stuff as well. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. I believe we have another question. This one is from Jessica Height. She asks, how can a smaller business best engage with Indigenous businesses? I work for a design practice and we have found it challenging to identify opportunities, to identify with businesses that within our chain of supply before a project gets to the construction phase. Example given, specialist engineering and design consultants. Alan, I will send that one over to you.
Yeah, and thanks, Jessica, for the question. I guess if I can take my cable containment hat off and put my WSP hat on with the engineering space, and it could be a follow-up conversation that we could have, Jess, because we're currently looking for strong candidates in this space as well. We're a large design consultancy business as well. In terms of getting involved in the design space, there's some great opportunities at the moment, particularly through the LXRP projects, and you probably have seen some of the outcomes that have been achieved on level crossings with the Southern Program Alliance. There's the Northwest Program Alliance, Western Program Alliance, where we're actually incorporating cultural values and cultural stories as well. So working directly with traditional owners, getting them involved in the design of the could be urban landscaping, could be shared user pathways, it could be the abutments, and incorporating the cultural values of where these projects are, to utilising the traditional owners and their knowledge and their stories, and getting them directly involved on the projects. So it's got that co-design element that achieves a self-determination by having traditional owners and the Aboriginal community directly engaged and involved in the project as well. And I think the LXRP are sort of leading the industry in this space as well. So I think they're currently working on a Indigenous design practice note, so it goes across all other alliances and hopefully out the industry of a best practice scenario. So it can get more Aboriginal businesses and traditional owners involved in these big projects as well.
Can't hear you, James.
Apologies about that, a bit of a technical difficulty. The next question we have, this one comes from Katie. I think it's about to pop. Oh, Kerry. And she asks, can you help us with criteria for distinguishing what cultural heritage business must rightly be provided by traditional owned organisations and what can be tendered to any Indigenous business? I'll let you take this one again, Tim.
Traditional owner business or cultural heritage business is really something that, intellectual cultural property protection is really important to traditional owners, and that can be anything from language, songlines, dance, art as well, and stories. And then we've also got the protection of cultural heritage over natural resource management as well. The best thing to do is always to get in contact with the traditional owner corporation on the lands in which we're doing business to get the right advice on that as well. So I know that from Berinjagaj and ourselves that we've been developing a really strong intellectual cultural property sort of protocols to make it really clear with people that and working to develop those to also work with the community, as well as ensuring that community isn't giving up information freely as well, and that there is a transaction that occurs and that the right respectful matter is done on that. But it's understanding that traditional owner cultural knowledge is everything. From we fight for it a lot with our native nursery about the cultural intellectual property rights to our plants that and the stories that are associated with that. And always get in contact with your traditional owner group that it's a land which you're working on. Talk to them, engage with them, and make sure that you've got those right protocols, and permissions in place before anything along those lines. Especially if you're an Aboriginal business and you're working on someone else's country, around that side of stuff as well. It's always really important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. The next one comes from Graham, and he asks, Steph, will major Victorian projects engage non-Kinaway members if they cannot source state-based businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In short, and we do. We currently do.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's about opening the market up to as many businesses as possible that are right fit for the job. So best business for the package. So, but we do also look at supply nation certification and registration as well. So that is a preference for us, that there is some kind of registration or certification with either of the bodies.
No worries, thanks, Steph. And this one is for you again, Steph, and it's from Paul, and he asks, as a corporate, are there any do's and don'ts when engaging in Indigenous business?
That's one I could talk about for ages, I guess. Look, I suppose from the corporate side, from both sides really, I think the main thing is that you understand why are we doing something. So are we just procuring from an Aboriginal business to get to tick a box, or to add a few $100,000 to our social procurement spend? I come from a very strong position of operating from a position of values. So we're really clear about why we want to engage with Aboriginal businesses, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. We know that it creates greater staff engagement. You're engaging with businesses that might be more innovative, who can help us to become profitable, because we might do things differently that give us a bit of an edge. I think the main thing is to be really genuine in your interactions on both sides. Don't some in the early days I had some interactions with some business owners that that felt sort of entitled to get work. They would say, oh, the Indigenous procurement policy says that we're entitled to get 1% of all of the work of government contracts. And yes, it's a requirement that we work under, but that's not how you build a relationship by demanding work. It's actually really about ensuring that you build the relationships, you understand what's in it for both of you. Don't compromise on your values. I know that some Indigenous business owners have been approached to do things that perhaps have not been aligned with their values just in order for a corporate to, achieve a target or tick a box. I would strongly, recommend that you don't go down that path, because at the end of the day, your reputation, your brand, that's what's valuable. You can deliver a service, but if you don't have a good brand and a good reputation, then you're gonna find it hard to find business. So from a business perspective, be true to your brand. Don't do anything that doesn't serve your business. Don't do anything just because a corporate asks you to do it. If it doesn't serve your business and there isn't a positive outcome for you, then don't do it. And from a corporate side, be really clear about what you're trying to achieve and authentically plan to achieve the outcomes and targets that the government has set for us. Don't just go through a tokenistic box ticking exercise. It's not sustainable.
Thank you. Thanks, Steph. And this is the final question for this morning's panel discussion. What do you say to those who see Aboriginal business as perhaps being a risk, and corporate buyers using the same suppliers that have always used for the last 20 years, as they are seen as being less of a risk? I'll give that one to you, Alan, for your thoughts on this question from Mel.
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Mel. Yeah, it's one of those things. It comes back to behaviour change for those decision makers who are sitting in these corporate offices who, they don't know what they don't know, and that's the beauty of government creating these requirements on projects with the 2.5% of procurement or participation on projects, and the IPP and other targets and the like, and then the role that Stephanie plays and the ICI managers, and and hopefully over time the team and construction teams and corporates do go through their cultural awareness training sessions so they can get a greater understanding and appreciation of how hard Aboriginal businesses do have it. When you looking at the opportunity to get involved in on these opportunities, it's going back to the relationships and having the conversations, and hopefully over time, once the decision makers do go through their own journey of cultural appreciation and awareness, they can actually look outside the square and actually realise there are a lot of suitable and credible Aboriginal businesses out there who can meet the need as well. And then they'll start having the confidence and the faith to start breaking out some of these packages and handing them directly to Aboriginal businesses.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alan. And on that note, I'd just like to thank everyone who submitted questions today. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to Steph, Alan and Tim for joining us for this morning's panel discussion.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Pleasure. We hope you all enjoyed today's panel discussion. And don't forget to keep an eye out for upcoming webinars over the course of Indigenous Business Month. If you do wish to attend any of these, please jump onto either the Indigenous Business Month website or the Kinaway website to register your interest. Thanks again to all who joined us today. We hope you have a great Friday and an even better weekend.